Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Russian propagandist Vladimir Solovyov is once again trying out new scare tactics, this time on Poland. On his latest television broadcast, he expressed outrage, saying that Warsaw, and I quote, chose this path itself, sending thousands of troops and even allowing NATO to use its infrastructure to help Ukraine. And his main declaration sounded as pompous as ever, stating that maybe we should strike after all.
А может, нам все-таки надо нанести удар? Польша же выбрала для себя эту судьбу. То есть посылать своих военных, якобы отпускников, в количестве более нескольких тысяч. Регулярно же их убиваем, и они туда возвращаются в гробах. Предоставить свою инфраструктуру транспортную для накопления техники, которая идет от стран НАТО на Украину. Это же регулярно. Поэтому я вам что скажу, поляки. Вы просто не лезьте в эту войну. А если хотите быть на стороне бандеровцев, потом не пищите.
Здравия желаю, Владимир Рудольфович. Согласен с вами, и вообще, поляки, видимо, ждут своего звездного часа, когда хватит одной-двух боеголовок с ядерным начинкой, чтобы стереть эту русофобскую страну, просто в порошок, потому что они просто напрашиваются на это, и, видимо, история повторяется.
So maybe we should break this fake after all. Of course we should. First, Solovyov advised the Poles not to get involved in this war. Now, this is a classic trope, often used by Russia supporters across Europe and beyond. You know, not our war, don't get involved, etc., etc. This also shows how the whole propaganda narrative actually connects. We have both the so-called grassroots anti-war stuff and the big guys from Moscow saying exactly the same thing. This is a war between us and them, Russia and Ukraine, so stop butting in if you don't want to leave with a fat lip. And it also connects to the massive propaganda offensive that followed the Russian drone incursion into Poland, trying to blame Ukraine and using bogus anti-war activism to drive a wedge between Warsaw and Kiev. Classic Russian reflexive control right there. Also, there is the Russian narrative reversal tactic. Whenever Russia does something nasty and you call them out for it, they get back at you by pointing the finger and saying, no, you did the same thing. How often do you hear of NATO violating Russian airspace, really? Drones? Weather balloons? I guess Russia's recent tradition of friendly fire makes for a very unpleasant airspace to be in, regardless if you're a friend or foe. But then, if Ukrainian drones can penetrate thousands of kilometers deep into Russia to say hello, imagine what would happen if an F-35 chose to do the same. The Russians would never complain, you see, because they would never notice. That blip on the radar must have been a seagull. Now, another Russian propagandist was celebrating another day of fake news. This time, Olga Skabeeva decided to report that a group of Russian drones has entered the Polish airspace allegedly. Like, what? The whole world was literally reporting the same thing as a fact. Nothing alleged about it. Pics or it didn't happen? Here you go. We have pictures. We've also had our reporter literally visiting the field where a drone was being recovered. But to Skabeeva, that Russian decoy drone sitting on a rabbit hutch in eastern Poland did not exist. It's all fake. Let me say that again. Russia, the global leader in producing false narratives, accusing others of spreading fake news.
Польша из-за ночного налета. Грандиозный, просто безумный скандал. Якобы группа российских дронов зашла в воздушное пространство страны. При этом никаких кадров российских БПЛА или обломков российских БПЛА Варшава до сих пор так и не предъявила, хотя обломки уже нашли в селе Честники Замоцкого повята. Об этом сообщили прокуратура и полиция Люблинского воеводства. В польских СМИ Появилось пока вот такое предполагаемое фото упавшего в Польшу беспилотника. На нем, судя по всему, Гербера. На хвосте виден номер с буквой «И», которую в России при маркировке не используют. Ну, то есть фотография, можно предположить, фейк.
So, what's next then? Reports of Russian missiles slamming into Kiev? It's fake news. Ukrainians drew them in Photoshop to discredit peaceful Mother Russia. The only problem is that for residents of Poland, all this wasn't fake. For citizens in Kiev, Kharkiv or Dnipro, these fakes explode every night and leave behind not memes, but craters, ruins, and funeral notices. Want to hear about fake stuff though? I can tell you about a few fake things. Let's begin with fake global superpower. Black Sea battle fleet chickening out over drone attacks, economy drip-fed by China, Kiev in 3 days becoming 3 years and counting. I identify as the Soviet Union in its prime is not enough, fam. Or how about fake peace process? We're peaceful. Oh, sorry about that missile making a hole in your government building. What was that you were saying? Trilateral talks? Sorry. Best we can do is more drone swarms. With this stuff, Russian diplomacy has become a meme at this point. Also, Russia literally invented the fake news media before it was a trendy catchphrase in the US, as evidenced by every single Russian state TV broadcast we've talked about on this program ever. I could go on, but you get the point. The Speaker of the Russian State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, has decided to go further in the militarization of education and proposed that every school should have a veteran of the war against Ukraine on their payroll. He said that these people, and I quote, have a serious influence and worldview and should pass on their qualities to the new generation, end of quote. However, no one has specified what exactly these qualities are. The ability to dig trenches with your bare hands, drinking industrial alcohol, competing in the discipline of who will surrender faster, or better still, psst, hey kid, want to do some war crimes? Now this is a continuation of the Kremlin's systematic policy of turning schools into training grounds for ideological indoctrination. The authorities are already actively parading the so-called heroes of the special military operation at meetings with kids. It is characteristic that many of these so-called heroes ended up in the war not from military registration and enlistment officers, but directly from prison cells. Russian education in 2025. No cheating during exams. Also, let's have an ex-convict speak to you about how to plant a landmine at a kindergarten in Ukraine. The Russian education system is becoming less and less about learning and more about producing future cannon fodder. Instead of knowledge, children are taught that the only real profession in life is that of a soldier. It is Hamas-grade indoctrination by this point, right down to the holy war narratives. It has even reached the point where television displays such shining examples of journalism as this. And I quote, "Dad said, imagine that you're killing Ukrainians, and then my hands started doing everything on their own." End of quote. And by the way, this is presented as an inspiring story.
Из ребят справлялся с задачей довольно уверенно.
У меня папа десантником работает, военным, и он решил меня научить обращаться с автоматом, чтобы я впоследствии мог пойти по его стопам. Сначала было непривычно. Отец говорил, представь, что убиваешь хохлов. И потом уже руки сами стали все делать.
As a result of all this, Russian schools now resemble training grounds for young militants rather than places where children acquire, knowledge. Television helps to scale up this practice, creating an atmosphere of hatred towards Ukrainians, the West, and anyone who happens to be wrong. The only question that remains is this. If history is taught in school by a hero of the special military operation, who will teach them geography? Perhaps the one guy who got lost and found himself in captivity near Kharkiv. I'm not even asking about math. Imagine teaching that in a country which has experienced over 1 million troop casualties in a 3-day special operation that just happens to be into its 4th year. And with this, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.